Here it is. This is home.
Right now, 5,000 sailors are living inside a $13 billion nuclear titan, a floating steel labyrinth the size of 3 football fields. They're launching 75 fighter jets into combat while fighting a different war below deck. To survive, this crew must consume 17,000 meals a day, sleep stacked 3 high in coffin bunks, and share 4 showers with 100 strangers. How do you feed, house, and clean a city that never touches land and operates under constant threat? The logistics are a high-stakes military operation. These aren't cruise ships, they're pressurized cages where one mistake costs everything. An aircraft carrier is fundamentally a giant stomach with a flight deck on top. To keep the gears of war turning, you have to fuel the machine, and on the Ford, that means producing 17,300 meals every single day. This isn't about home cooking. This is about the galley, a high-pressure, 24-hour food factory where the temperature regularly pushes 135 degrees Fahrenheit, and it never shuts down. Because the ship never sleeps, which means the kitchen never closes. 4 meal windows keep the beast fed: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and mids. Midnight rations, the lifeblood of the night shift. The engineers, the reactor techs, the deck crews grinding away under the moon while the rest of the world dreams. The people behind the spatulas aren't just cooks. They are Navy culinary specialists trained at the grueling Fort Lee School in Virginia. But nothing, and they'll tell you this themselves, nothing prepares them for the reality of a carrier deployment. A team of roughly 100 specialists manages the entire population. 1 cook for every 50 sailors. Imagine running a restaurant where the customers never leave, they're all sleep deprived, and every single one of them is armed. The math of a single day's consumption is staggering. The CS team cracks through 1,600 pounds of chicken, 160 gallons of milk, 350 pounds of lettuce, 800 pounds of beef, and then there's the most important fuel of all, 20,000 cups of coffee every single day. The daily grocery bill lands somewhere between $45,000 and $65,000. That's not a monthly budget. That's not a quarterly expense. That's what it costs every 24 hours just to keep the crew fed, caffeinated, and too full to mutiny. Run the numbers over a month, and that's over $1.5 million spent entirely on groceries. But here's the biggest problem with a floating city. It can't go to the supermarket. When the freezers start to look empty, the ship performs one of the most dangerous maneuvers in naval history, the underway replenishment, the unrep. Every 7 to 10 days, a supply ship pulls alongside the carrier, both ships moving at 15 knots, separated by only 100 to 150 feet of churning, angry ocean. One wrong move by the helmsman, and there's $1 billion collision on everyone's hands. Steel cables are shot across the gap. Thousands of pallets, frozen steak, toilet paper, everything a small city needs, slid across the water were airlifted by MH-60S Seahawk helicopters in what the Navy calls vertical replenishment. It's a logistical ballet that can last 10 hours. And if the weather turns or an enemy submarine is detected beneath the hull, the lines are cut, and the crew goes on rations. The Navy doesn't just want sailors full, they want them functional. A male sailor gets allocated 2,850 calories a day. Females get 2,100. Sounds like plenty until a sailor spends 14 hours hauling chains on a flight deck in 100-degree humidity. Those calories don't last. They vanish. And after that 14-hour shift in the hangar bay, a sailor goes to their rack. On the older Nimitz-class carriers, a berthing area holds 180 people under one roof. The newer Ford class broke that down into 40-person modules and called it modern. But modern is a very relative term out here. A sailor's living space is a 77-inch by 27-inch rectangle. The mattress is 3 inches of foam. There are exactly 20 inches of overhead clearance. Wake up too fast in the middle of the night, and the steel frame above announces itself immediately. They call them coffin lockers, and they earned that name. Privacy in a berthing area is a myth. The only barrier between a sailor and the rest of the world is a thin, flame-retardant blue curtain. Behind it, a small reading light and a tiny storage bin under the mattress where an entire life gets compressed. Letters from home, a tablet, a few rows of non-regulation snacks. And then there's the detail that nobody talks about enough, the loss of time. Many sailors work in the bowels of the ship. Deck 5, Deck 6, Deck 7, well below the waterline. On a 6-month deployment, going 2 weeks without seeing a single ray of natural sunlight is completely normal. Waking under fluorescent lights, eating under fluorescent lights, sleeping under fluorescent lights. The circadian rhythm doesn't just break, it disappears entirely. And sleeping on a carrier isn't just about the cramped space, it's about the noise. A berthing area directly under the flight deck isn't really a place to sleep. It's a place to wait for the next earthquake. When a 30-ton FA-18 Super Hornet hits the deck at 150 miles per hour and snags the arresting wire, it sounds like a car crash happening 3 feet above a sailor's head. The ship itself is a giant echo chamber. The heavy steel doors, the dogs, clang shut with a bone-shaking ring. The massive anchor chains rattle through the hull. The air conditioning vents hiss at a constant 80 decibels. To survive it, sailors become addicts of earplugs and eye masks. They develop what the fleet calls the carrier lean, the ability to sleep at a 15-degree angle while the ship rolls through a storm. This is where the glamour of the Navy officially dies. Now let's talk about the heads. Bathrooms on a carrier are communal. In an enlisted berthing area, 4 toilets and 4 showers serve 100 people. On the USS Gerald R. Ford, the Navy tried to be revolutionary. They removed all urinals and installed gender-neutral seated vacuum toilets to make the ship more flexible for different crew ratios. It was a disaster. The Ford runs a vacuum septic system, similar to a Boeing 747, but on a massive scale. Because the pipes are arguably undersized for a 5,000-person crew, they clog constantly. On average, 2 major clogging incidents happen every single day. When a main line goes down, an entire section of the ship loses bathroom access. Sailors trek 5 decks up or down just to find a working toilet. But here's the thing, the fix isn't a plunger. When the system gets scaled up or clogged with unauthorized items, sailors flushing old t-shirts, cleaning rags, things that have absolutely no business being in a vacuum pipe, the Navy has to perform what's called an acid flush, a specialized chemical cleaning of the entire piping network. The cost? $400,000 per flush. Every time the crew gets careless with the plumbing, it costs the American taxpayer nearly $500,000 just to get the toilets working again. It's a design flaw that has haunted the Ford since the day it was commissioned in 2017, and it doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon. And even when the plumbing cooperates, nobody's living in luxury. Because fresh water on a carrier is a precious commodity. The ship's nuclear-powered desalination plants can pull thousands of gallons of salt water straight from the ocean and purify it, but the priority goes to the reactors first. Then the jet engines. The crew gets what's left. A Navy shower isn't a shower, it's a procedure. 30 seconds of water, get wet, then shut it off. Soap up every inch while standing in a cold, silent stall. Then 60 seconds of rinse. Done. A standard civilian shower burns through about 60 gallons of water. A Navy shower uses 3. Linger in there for 5 minutes and it's not just considered selfish. A sailor is actively draining the ship's tactical reserves. During high-tempo flight operations, the water boss can cut off shower access entirely to make sure the jets have enough distilled water for their systems. The aircraft come before the people keeping them in the air. If the galley is the stomach of the ship, the laundry is the sweat gland. During a deployment, the ship processes 150,000 pounds of laundry every single week. The laundry rooms sit deep in the ship's belly, tucked near the engine rooms where the heat is legendary. Industrial ventilation running at full capacity, and temperatures still hit 135 degrees. Sailors working those shifts operate on heat management protocols, 1 hour on, 30 minutes in a cool zone, rotating in and out just to avoid heat stroke. There's no personal washing machine. Clothes go into a mesh bag with a stencil on it, and that bag disappears into a mountain of other bags. When the laundry queens, The crew assigned to the shift finish the cycle, the bags come back to a central point, and sailors hope for the best. Lost socks are a way of life, such a consistent way of life, in fact, that many sailors quietly resort to sink washing their uniforms in the berthing area, technically against the rules, but a damp uniform beats a lost one every time. Now, in the civilian world, there's a comfortable story people tell themselves about meritocracy. On a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, the class system isn't a story. It's written in stainless steel and polyester, and it governs something as fundamental as where a person sits to eat. For the vast majority of the crew, the E1s through E6s, mealtime is a survival sport. The enlisted mess deck is loud, chaotic, and relentless. It feels like a high school cafeteria colliding with a subway station at rush hour. The line wraps around 3 buckheads. A tan plastic tray gets grabbed. Past the sneeze guards, a mess crank, a junior sailor pulled from their actual technical job to scrub floors and serve food for 90 days straight, slaps a scoop onto the plate. And then there are 15, maybe 20 minutes to eat before the next wave of hungry sailors starts hovering over empty chairs, waiting. But move up a few decks and the entire atmosphere shifts. The officer's wardroom is the inner sanctum. Carpeted floors, tables dressed in white linens. The food is often the same as what's being served downstairs, but it arrives on actual china with silverware that doesn't rattle on a plastic tray. The presentation is different. The pace and the silence is different. And for the highest ranking officers, the captain, the admiral, there are private cabins with dedicated stewards, a centuries-old naval tradition built around what the Navy calls distance and deference. The authority of command requires a certain separation, and that separation is maintained through every meal, every day. At sea, while a 19-year-old on the flight deck is eating a burger with grease-stained hands in a 15-minute window, the admiral is across the ship, discussing geopolitics over a properly set table. Same ship, completely different worlds. And if you want to understand how that gap gets maintained, how the machine keeps running beneath all of it, you have to talk about cranking. Every department on the ship, nuclear engineers, fighter jet mechanics, doesn't matter, has to tax their junior personnel. For the first few months of a deployment, those young sailors get pulled from their actual jobs and sent to the supply department to work as mess attendants. They aren't fixing jets anymore. They're emptying scupper drains, hauling 50-pound bags of flour, and spending 14 hours a day hunched over what the crew calls the deep sink. It's brutal, greasy, and completely thankless, but it's also the industrial glue holding the entire ship together. Without the cranks, the $13 billion Ford would be buried in trash and salmonella within 72 hours. But the hardest part of carrier life isn't the physical work. It's what sailors call the Groundhog Day effect. When the horizon disappears, when the sun becomes a rumor, when the variety of civilian life gets replaced by the same steel corridors and fluorescent lights, the human brain starts to glitch. Tuesday looks exactly like Saturday. There are no weekends. There are no days off. Every single day is a work day. To fight the disorientation, the ship's internal TV circuit broadcasts the date and time on a constant loop, as if the ship itself is trying to remind everyone that time is still moving. Sailors talk about the blue room, not a physical place, but a mental state. The walls closing in, the silence getting louder. To push back against it, the Navy employs MWR officers, morale, welfare, and recreation, whose entire job is to keep 5,000 people from mentally unraveling. And their most powerful weapon? The steel beach picnic, engine silenced. 5,000 sailors on the flight deck, burgers on the grill, cornhole on the non-skid, and for a few hours, the only thing in the air is wind, without the smell of jet fuel. It sounds almost absurd, but it's a strategic necessity. There's also a running joke in the Navy that every sailor knows by heart: if they serve you lobster, start calling your family. In the civilian world, surf and turf is a luxury. On a carrier, it's often a warning. A deployment extension just got announced. The ship is heading into a high-tension combat zone. Or, it's birthday night. Once a month, the galley pulls out all the stops for sailors born that month. White tablecloths come down to the enlisted mess. For 1 hour, a kid from rural Ohio sits down to a $40 steak while the ship rolls through the swells of the Mediterranean, a small, deliberate touch of humanity in an otherwise mechanical existence. Now, 5,000 people, 6 months at sea. The waste doesn't disappear on its own. The ship runs an entire dedicated waste management department. Food waste goes into the pulper, a giant industrial disposal that grinds everything into a slurry safe enough to discharge into the deep ocean. Paper and cardboard get shredded and pulped into biodegradable bricks. And plastic? The Navy operates a strict zero-discharge policy. Every piece of plastic gets melted down in a thermal processor into what the crew calls plastic pucks, dense, heavy discs the size of a manhole cover, stacked and stored in odor-proof rooms until the ship reaches port. Want to know how long a carrier has been at sea? Count the pucks in the hangar bay. The ship is a completely self-contained ecosystem, which means when something goes wrong with the human body out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, there's no calling for help. Deep in the hull of the Ford sits a hospital that would rival a mid-sized city, full operating rooms, an ICU, a dental clinic with X-ray capabilities, and a working pharmacy. The hospital corpsmen. The corpsmen patrol the birthing areas watching for birthing fever, the rapid spread of respiratory infections that tears through a compartment when 100 people spend months breathing the same recycled air. And up on the main deck, the chop shop runs on a near constant loop. The ship's barbershop, one of the only places on the entire carrier where rank gets temporarily suspended, everyone waits in the same line, and everyone walks out with the same $0 haircut. This is the ultimate paradox of modern naval power, a machine capable of generating enough electricity to power a city of 300,000 people. Electromagnetic catapults launching 80,000-pound aircraft into the sky every 45 seconds. $13.3 billion to build the most dominant weapon in human history. And all of it, every reactor, radar array, and stealth fighter depends entirely on the physical and mental endurance of a 19-year-old sailor. It depends on that sailor sleeping through what sounds like a car crash, staying clean on 3 gallons of water, eating mids at 2 in the morning in a 130-degree kitchen so they have enough left in the tank to turn a wrench for another 6 hours. These men and women aren't just living at sea. They are enduring it. They are sacrificing their privacy, their comfort, and their sense of time so that this 100,000-ton behemoth can sit in a foreign ocean in project power. So, here's the real question. Could you do it? Could you live in a steel coffin for 6 months taking 3-gallon showers knowing that your only privacy is a thin blue curtain? Let us know in the comment section.